Hi, this is Greg Kilstrom. Welcome to Season 3 of The Agile World, where we discuss customer and employee experience, organizational and workforce transformation, and how business can adapt and continually improve in an agile age. The Agile World podcast is brought to you by TEKsystems, an industry leader in full-stack technology services, talent services, and real-world application. For more information, go to teksystems.com. To read more about the topics discussed in this show, you can go to my website at theagile.world and read my latest articles, or get a copy of my latest book, The Agile Workforce, now available on Amazon and other retailers. My name is Greg Kilstrom, and I'm the host of the Agile World podcast. Today we're going to talk about using AI with lean principles to achieve greater success. To help me discuss this topic, I'd like to welcome Lomit Patel, SVP Growth Together Labs and best-selling author of Lean AI. Lomit, welcome to the show.
Excited to be here. Thanks for having me, Greg.
Yeah, looking forward to it. And why don't we start out by you telling a little bit about your background as well as where you currently are?
Yeah, so hi everyone. My name's Lomit Patel. I'm the currently the Senior Vice President of Growth at Together Labs. Together Labs is um, it's a metaverse. Our most popular gaming app is called MVU, IMVU, where we have millions of users that create virtual avatar identities and interact with creating different friends from around the world and having shared experience, virtual experiences. And where have been around, MVU's been around for over 15 years, and it's one of the top three grossing social networking apps in the App Store. So definitely seen a lot of growth there. And I've been with that company for over 5 years. And prior to that, I've worked with a number of different startups for the last 20 years. And my role has always been around joining startups to really help figure out how we can grow the business primarily in the area of growing users and revenue. So it's all around user acquisition, retention, and monetization efforts.
So let's get started here talking about AI and lean principles and things like that. So for those listening who may not be 100% sure what we mean by the term lean, can you explain what that means as well as how it might differ from agile or other maybe terms that are used used interchangeably in some cases?
Yeah, so lean is is a terminology that's gotten really popular, especially started off primarily like a lot of startups use that. But the idea isn't really about sort of being cheap, but it's more around, how do you sort of leverage your time and resources as effectively as possible and to try and get to the outcomes or the goals that you're looking to achieve. And so primarily it's all around improving processes and execution around the way you that you sort of manage your business. And an example primarily that where I focus a lot on lean is in the realm of marketing. So the idea is, when you're running campaigns, when you're optimizing results, the idea is, how can you get better, faster, and smarter around either leveraging technology or leveraging people as well as possible to try and get to the outcomes of helping the business grow as efficiently as possible.
What helped you make the connection between artificial intelligence and lean?
Yes, so for me, I've been a big proponent on looking into artificial intelligence for the past like 5, 6 years. The reality is, artificial intelligence has been integrated into a lot of different businesses and processes. And a lot of people may not realize it. I know it's spoken about more openly now, but a lot of these companies that, especially in marketing, where people are spending advertising dollars with like Google and Facebook, a lot of their platforms integrate AI in some way, shape, or fashion, because the idea there is to really help them to sort of leverage all of this data that they have on their users to really help advertisers to get better at being able to target the right users with the right message at the right time to really achieve the results that they're looking to get in terms of the how they define success. And so for me, fortunately here at Together Labs, one of the things that we were able to kind of do early on was to sort of figure out, how can we sort of build or leverage a system of AI that could kind of sit between us and the way that we're sort of managing all of our paid user acquisition budget with all of these different partners that have some form of AI that's built into their systems, which for the most part is self-serving because it kind of works for their benefit. And we wanted to try and sort of build a system that could kind of holistically look at how we could optimize our budget as efficiently as possible. And so the connection for us in using AI was was initially the use case around how can we optimize our marketing budget as efficiently as possible to acquire users, to retain users, and to figure out the best way to monetize those users.
That's great. And you hinted on some of this and already, but for other teams that are integrating AI and lean principles, you mentioned some of the marketing metrics, maybe, but what type of metrics and KPIs are most helpful to determine if the integration is successful?
That's a really good question, and that can differ for different businesses. But generally, what we have found in terms of success metrics, and I think this would probably apply to most marketing teams, especially when you're like spending money on acquiring customers. Some of the key metrics that we look at. One is really the cost to acquire a customer. How much does it cost to actually uh, acquire a user? What is the return on ad spend? So, how much money are you spending versus how much revenue are you generating from those efforts? Another one is if, for example, you're not initially getting a paying customer, then you can kind of look at what's the CPA, which is the cost per action. The action could be whether you're trying to drive a download or drive a registration or lead, depending on the type of business. And then the other one that we look at, and I think especially companies that spend a lot of money on acquiring customers, is really kind of the payback period. So for example, if you're spending $100,000 a month, how long does it take for you to recoup that money back once you bring paying customers in? And so for the most part, those tend to be kind of the key metrics that I've found, that a lot of like especially performance marketing teams look at when they're sort of evaluating the success of different AI platforms.
Just to follow up on that a little bit, what do you get any objections other than maybe a cost, a budget type objection? Do you get any objections from team members when you start talking about introducing AI or even lean principles? But I mean, introducing AI into the mix, or what are some of the I guess barriers that you need to overcome in those cases?
Yeah, there's always so what I would say with anything new, that there's always misinformation out there that
Yeah.
people hear about when it comes to artificial intelligence, but generally it's in the realm of either it's like too pricey or too expensive, or the other realm is really how is this going to really impact my personal situation in terms of like my job.
Yeah.
And so what I found is educating users is real. Yeah, not just by users, what I mean is internally, educating different team members and really sort of trying to sort of build internal consensus around this is really important, because ultimately for any artificial intelligence, any way, shape, or form that you want to implement that, it really comes down to having, people really believe in that, right? So it's important to try and get the people on board, as well as try to make sure that you have the right setup and the integrations put in place. And a big part of that is working with your data team to ensure that you have the right data being integrated into these different platforms so that they're able to leverage that data to surface insights and take actions on it. But um, but to answer your question, generally what I've found is, in terms of best practice, don't try to come up with recommendations of something that could be really complicated for companies to really understand. And so in the examples that I've used at companies which have been really successful, especially in the domain of marketing, it's all around the budget, because everybody has a marketing budget, and ultimately, whether you're a CEO or a head of marketing or even a marketing manager, you're kind of held in some way, shape, or form to try and spend that money as diligently as possible. And so using that as the simple use case to try and introduce artificial intelligence, I've always found that it's generally been able to get a lot more consensus around that. And the idea of how we've kind of introduced it is ideally sort of start with one platform and sort of run simple A/B tests where we have the the artificial intelligence machine kind of running certain campaigns that we can kind of compare results to internally, how we're managing those campaigns, and try to see how results are actually looking, and over time try to move more and more of the spend over into the artificial intelligent machine to try and manage it. Once you're able to see success and the results are able to hold up. And so generally that, I would say, in terms of the time frame, once you start running those sort of um, those A/B tests, usually takes probably a couple of months, like 2 to 3 months, where you can successfully prove out that the AI is actually working a lot more efficiently and effectively than just having different team members trying to manage those campaigns. And then once you start moving more things over to AI, then the question that comes up is, how do you evolve the roles and the responsibilities of the different team members so that instead of them doing a lot of spending a lot more time on the manual tasks and processes, their role evolves, and you can provide more training where it's more around supporting the AI machine to ensure it's getting the right inputs and the right oversight, so that it's really augmenting the team versus becoming a decision of the machine versus the team. So it's more of a how the team and the machine can work well together.
Yeah, and I love that you're bringing that up, as far as there is always a human component to, well, to really any change or any implementation of any new system or anything. But I feel like sometimes it's overlooked when we talk about AI, because the thought is it's something that can be done autonomously or without much human support. But in reality, you need the buy-in of the people, as you were saying earlier. You need the buy-in of the people in the teams to get it going in the first place, and you need the long-term support of it to make it successful. So I'm glad you brought that up. That's great.
Definitely, and then one other thing that I would add to that is that it's also important to continue to sort of share the results of how the AI machine is doing. At different companies, I know generally most companies have like all hand meetings, whether that's like once a month or whatever the cadence is. But the idea is to continue to keep sharing the results and being fully transparent, so that everyone in the company can get access to knowing how this new technology is working, and it sort of stops a lot of people, sort of people that may not have access to knowing the results, sort of coming up with different conclusions or different hypotheses around how this might be impacting the business. So continuing to keep sharing that success just gets more and more people comfortable and starts winning over more and more support around the idea being, okay, if we did this in marketing, how could we maybe apply this to other functions or areas in the business as well?
Well, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about your book, Lean AI. So I like that in the description you talk about the judicious use of AI and automation with lean principles. So where would you say AI belongs and doesn't belong in the kind of work that you do?
Yeah, and so what motivated me to really write the book Lean AI? It's actually part of the Lean Startup series from Eric Ries, which is obviously a really popular and best-selling book. And Eric Ries is one of the co-founders at the company Together Labs where I work today. And one of the things he was able to sort of see firsthand was how we were able to, you know, judiciously use AI and automation, especially over the last 5 years in the business, to really be able to scale up growth better, faster, and smarter. And it was really leveraging a lot of the same principles of the lean startup, which is all around experimentation, around trying to to pretty much increase your velocity of learning and to be able to figure out how to use data and use it in a way where you're able to really figure out who are the right customers to target on the right platforms at the right time and be able to do that rinse and repeat process by just running you know uh, as many experiments as possible. And and so, what I would say, the judicious use of AI and automation is really coming back to that core virtuous cycle of the velocity of learning. And with AI and automation, it just enables you to be able to run tens and thousands of experiments a month versus running, a couple of hundred at that best case scenario, depending on how big your team may be. And so that's
Right.
what we were able to do, and we were able to like break out those experiments when it came to the marketing funnel on different channels, for example, like Facebook, Google, but we also spend money with a whole slew of other partners. And there we were able to sort of run experiments around different types of audiences, like who would be the right people to target. We were able to run um, thousands of experiments around different creative messages to really figure out what's the right message that really resonated with the different types of audiences we were targeted. And so it really came down to that whole area of personalization, to really personalize our messages to the right users at the right time across different platforms. Because what we really figured out is that different messages and different audiences reacted differently based on different platforms. And to be able to manually sort of run these different campaigns would was just a huge challenge. But having a machine to automate that process really enable us to be able to run that at a huge scale. And then, when we were able to bring these users into our platform, we were able to figure out pretty quickly based on the user behaviors and actions, like what would be the right personal experiences to give them during the onboarding experience to get them engaged into the product as quickly as possible. And with better engagement, we're able to retain those users at a much better rate than we used to. And then with retention, we're able to really figure out what was the right ways to monetize those users. And as an example, at Together Labs, we monetize users either where they make purchases for in-app purchases, where they're buying MVU credits to redeem against different virtual stuff, or through advertising where they can earn those credits. And so by using AI, we were able to identify user behavior and actions to really figure out pretty quickly what would be the right way to monetize those users and give them those types of experiences, and through the different user journeys that we're able to create. And so, long story short, the entire marketing funnel just got a lot more leaner and a lot more efficient. Just by the fact that we're able to use real time data to personalize different experiences for users.
As far as the lean part of lean AI, do you agree that people sometimes get the wrong idea about whether it's agile or lean? And you mentioned a lot of people think of lean sometimes as just being cheap or something like that. But these are actually more scientific, methodical methods of doing things. How do you kind of overcome some of that when you're talking with people?
Yeah, and I agree with you. You know, people tend to have like different biases
Yeah,
to different terms. Um, what I um, what I will say with lean, at least when it comes to startups, you know, most people that work in startups now are are pretty familiar with kind of lean principles and being agile. Reason being, for the most part, in startups, your failure rate is over 95%, right? Like most companies that get funded, and end up going out of business. And so, if you want to sort of be that small minority that actually ends up becoming successful, you want to be open to adopting new thought processes and ideas, and that's where agile and lean is definitely adopted at a much much higher um, uh, velocity than probably in other established businesses where people have more tasks and processes and uh, more different ways in terms of how they want to sort of maintain where the growth level may be. And the truth is, with with lean and agile, where I would say where they overlap is that being lean is really about being flexible, right? In terms of what's the right way to try and get to an outcome or an objective. And with agile, it's the same thing because you it's like being like water, where you need to sort of adapt to the environment of where you are,
yeah,
and
yeah,
and um, and what I've found is, a, a lot of those, at least with both those principles, and I've worked at a number of different startups, it's been ingrained into our sort of thought process and mindset right from the start when you join these companies that, it's not about, you know, uh, trying to be too rigid because there's another word that comes into startups a lot, which is pivot,
yeah.
right?
Right,
If
right.
something isn't
I've
working,
heard
then
that one before. Yeah.
that's right. Then you got to be able to like adopt, and that's where agile is really important because pivot kind of uh, connects with being agile. So
Yeah.
the truth is if you truly believe in the data, then you kind of use that as your guide to really help you to figure out if you want to how agile you need to be and where you need to pivot to try and figure things out.
One last question before we wrap up here. I always, as a fellow author, I always like to ask about the process of writing a book, and what can you share about the process of writing, and did it help you to look at the subject matter differently? Did you learn anything new through the process, or what would you do maybe differently if you work on a new book? Just would love some thoughts from.
Yeah, so what I would say is writing a book is definitely you know a, a unique experience for me. A big part of writing a book was really just being disciplined in terms of trying to figure out in the day, like how much time I was going to allocate to writing that, and making sure that I was blocking that time out in my calendar. Which for me, for the most part, I was writing, a big part of the book in the evenings, so between like 10 p.m. and 3 a.m. So I kind of, started cutting back on sleep to sacrifice for writing the book. But I think, just creating a predictable environment where you'd want to write and a predictable timeline, so that it becomes kind of a habit. I think that was important for me. But in terms of the subject matter, um, the other thing that it, you know, for for me, because I speak a lot at conferences, so I was able to socialize the idea around what I was writing about and be able to get real time feedback because I was talking a lot about this content at conferences, and that really helped me to really understand just just how much value there really was for people to really learn about this content and how little of it was being adopted at that time because a lot of the big successful companies that people know about like Uber and Netflix and Amazon. I mean, these companies are adopting this every day, but
Yeah.
but but the majority of companies have. at least at that time frame, were not adopting it to that same level. And so, it was kind of exciting to know that that there definitely was a lot of demand for people to learn about this type of content. And then the other thing that I found, in terms of writing a book, I love. I started writing. I used to love writing before, and obviously, I hadn't written for a while, but I started writing a lot of articles around this subject and white papers, and that really got me back into the habit of writing again,
Yeah.
and just putting articles out there, and as especially nowadays, like when you post things on, like, social media like LinkedIn, or different like blogging platforms, you get a lot of feedback, and that really helped, sort of the help shape the content for the book, in terms of like what would be the right content, the right articles, sort of help sort of build the different chapters that I was ended up going into the book.
Yeah.
And 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 then the other thing, that I found that was really helpful, was just reaching out to sort of kind of creating your own, sort of, set of folks that you trust, and sort of having them sort of look over the content and give you feedback. So it was able to evolve the content to ensure it wasn't just related to my experience, but it was actually relatable to a lot of other things that people, in other companies were doing as well. And so from that standpoint, it really helped sort of validate the idea by looking at it broader than just kind of through my lens, and getting perspectives from other people
I like
during
that.
writing.
Yeah, no, I love hearing that, and I think I've done some of that after after doing a couple books. I like, it's almost like an agile approach to writing a book, because you're kind of workshopping some ideas and evolving, and that's great that you're getting feedback from all kinds of different sources, and making something. It's almost focus group tested, but in the real world. So I love that way of thinking.
Yeah, and you're right. It really is an agile process, because the truth is, at least, you know before you start a book, you want to come up with kind of like a book plan, so to speak, kind of like a business plan, where you sort of outline different chapters, and put high level bullets in terms of what you would want to write about in different chapters. But but once you start writing the book, at least for me, what I realized was, whatever I had for chapters, like 1 to 12 or whatever. Initially, my idea was I was going to do chapter 1, then I was going to do chapter 2. But once I started writing the book, what I realized was that you don't necessarily need to be sequential in terms of how
Right.
you approach it. And so I
Agreed.
started, depending on what was going on at that time, in you know in my life at work. There were certain areas of the book that I was more excited about writing about. So, that's the other thing: being agile, and sort of, doing what works well for you, versus trying to do it traditionally and sequentially. So I wrote, the chapters in different orders at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And another thing that I used for me, at the time, I was commuting to work, and my commute it's a pretty long commute. It took me like 2 hours, based on traffic here in Silicon Valley, to get to work each way. So I was
Yeah.
spending roughly around 4 hours a day in the car. And so what I started doing in the car was was brainstorming ideas around the different chapters that I was going to write about, um, that
Yeah.
that day, and I would just record in, a lot of those ideas, so that when I would get home at the end of the day, I would just transcribe a lot of the audio into text. So at least I had something to work with
That's
that
great.
evening.
It's helpful to know. I haven't done the audio transcribing thing, but I definitely I've written things way out of order, just based on, similar to what you're describing. It just, sometimes you just feel inspired to talk about a subject, or something's going on that day. So it's good to know I'm not alone.
Sure.
Well, Lamet, thanks so much for joining the show. For those listening, what's the best way for them to keep up with you and what you're doing?
Yeah, best way to keep up with me. I would say I'm very active on LinkedIn. So, anybody who wants to reach out to me on LinkedIn, I'm happy to connect. I'm always putting a lot of good content out on there around startups, lean principles, AI leadership. So basically, you can connect with me. It's basically my name, Lomit, Lomit Patel, Patel. I also have a blog where I put a lot of content, and that's pretty much my name too. So it's lomitpatel.com. So, connect with me on my blog or on LinkedIn or on Twitter as well. And that's the best way to keep in touch. And anybody has any questions, always feel free to reach out. I'm happy to provide any help or insights if anybody has any questions where I can help.
Wonderful. Well, again, I'd like to thank Lomit Patel, SVP of Growth at Together Labs and best-selling author of Lean AI, for joining the show. Thanks for listening to The Agile World with Greg Kilstrom. See you next week. Thanks again for listening to the Agile World podcast, brought to you by Tech Systems. I'm your host, Greg Kilstrom. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to subscribe on your podcast channel of choice and leave us a rating so that others can find the show more easily. You can learn more and get a copy of my latest book, The Agile Workforce, from my website at theagile.world.